So, good afternoon everyone. Now today we'll finish off the medieval portion. There are a few small things, एक आध light जला दो. There are a few small things missing from, there are a few small things left in medieval, and there are a few small things left in medieval, and then there were a few things missing from modern as well, right? About some 20th century peasant and social movements, right? So that is something that will, pardon? Portuguese, abhi nahi. Portuguese is left a bit, thoda sa. There is 1 point left in the Portuguese. Nahi, Mughals is done. For the Portuguese, no. Mughal is done. क्या आपको कोई डाउट है तो डाउट पूछिए, बताइए. ओके, अच्छा, एक से. So we were writing about the Portuguese, right? Just to briefly rewind, we were writing about the Portuguese, and in the Portuguese, we had broadly discussed that why the Portuguese came to India, as they primarily sought to dominate the trade in black pepper and find a new way primarily to escape the hold of the Ottomans, as well as of those, that is the Egyptians, who dominated the sea route trade through the Red Sea, or the Ottomans, who were the ones who sought to extract a rent or extract or tax the trade passing through their territories between Europe and Asia. Okay, that is there. So it is in this context that the Portuguese, starting from Vasco da Gama, tried to find an alternative route. It is Almeida who was the first Governor General, and it was under him that you see that they managed to capture Diu. Ultimately, the main consolidator of the Portuguese Empire was Albuquerque, and it was under Albuquerque that they managed to capture Goa. At the same point of time, they started the practice of building forts in a number of coastal regions, primarily seeking what? To build a number of ports in the coastal region to ensure that they could continue to dominate and control the trade in the region. And that's there. And ultimately, it is after him, Nino da Cunha, who actually even took some of the steps, who shifted the capital or their major center base from Cochin to Goa, and ultimately also took some of the initial steps for abolition of sati. We broadly discussed this. Now the last thing to talk here is the factors which led to the decline of the Portuguese. Okay, now, yes. Bassein. Bassein was a important port city again in coastal portions of what you say. Bassein was the same Bassein in Bengal. Now, actually, I have not discussed this, but under Bassein was actually where? In Bengal. And just like the, before the British and the French, the Portuguese sought trading rights in Bengal as well. And that is where they sought to establish their presence in Bassein. Okay. And da Cunha, it was under da Cunha that they took steps to establish themselves in Bassein. That's there. That's the relevance of Bassein. Anything else? हाँ अभी रुके, मुंबई वाला एंगल पे आ जाते हैं अभी कि क्या हुआ मुंबई का और बॉम्बे का क्या हुआ. सी actually what about the Portuguese? Now let me first get into the factors which led to the decline of the Portuguese. There we'll talk about Bombay as well. What is the scene of Bombay in the whole situation? Uh, the first factors which led to the decline of the Portuguese, we talk about 3 or 4 major factors. One of the things is that the Mughals actually, Akbar gave an audience to the Portuguese priests, two Portuguese priests, and this was a tradition which was later continued by Jahangir as well. So Akbar and Jahangir both gave a certain audience to the Portuguese priests, something which gave hope to the Portuguese that if they could bring about a religious conversion and convert the Mughal rulers to Christianity, it would help them consolidate their presence in the region. At the same point of time, will be a major success for the Portuguese. So, however, none of this actually happened. Even though Jahangir allowed them to stay over, it really they could not convert, the Mughals. At the same point of time, the Portuguese wanted to monopolize the trade with the East, or they wanted to be the only European power who must be allowed to do trade in the region, and not just the only European power. They were of the opinion that nobody else must be allowed to secure trading rights in the region. But India had, or South Asia at that time, had a long history of having trade relations with everyone. The Arabs, the Egyptians, or for that matter, the Europeans, through land route or through sea route. So, in 1608, 1609, Captain William Hawkins, yeah, I don't know whether he is the same Hawkins pressure cooker wale, but he's Captain William Hawkins. He came to what? The port of Surat, and he basically hoped to get trading rights. He's a British individual, and he came with the hope of securing trading rights for the British East India Company in under the Mughal Empire in South Asia, starting from Surat onwards in 1607, 1608 onwards. Now the Portuguese said, do not give trading rights to the whom? British. But the Mughal king disregarded, Jahangir disregarded the opinion of the Portuguese. And since then, it was clear that the Portuguese had overestimated their own influence over the Mughal king. And you see that this is where the Mughal patronage for the Portuguese was never exclusive. And as the Mughals opened up to the British as well, you see that the Portuguese are going to face a problem. What? The British Navy is more powerful than the Portuguese. And now you see that there is the fact that the Mughals did not favor the Portuguese over the British means that the British have to compete with the Portuguese. The Portuguese have to compete with the British, and the British have a far more bigger territorial, naval and a military presence than the Portuguese had. So clearly, this is where the British come, eventually the French also come. The British and French had bigger navies, bigger population, bigger territory and bigger military sizes than the Portuguese ever had. And this is going to become a tough contest for the Portuguese to deal with. Whom? The much bigger the British and the French, who arrived later. The advantage of the Portuguese was that they were the first mover advantage, that they were the first ones to set eyes here. But it was once the British and the French set their eyes towards east, they could not deal with the British and the French competition. So that's one of the first things about the role of Mughals as well as the competition from the British and the French. Now, the role of the Mughals and the competition from the British and the French. Now, it is at this point of time that in terms of the role of Mughals, we say, in terms of the role of Mughals, we say that Mughal gave patronage to Portuguese but refused to grant an exclusive monopoly to whom? To them. But refused to grant an exclusive monopoly to them. And in 1607, 1608, Captain William Hawkins managed to get trading rights and set up the right to set up a factory in Surat. From whom? Jahangir. From Jahangir. Now, that's about the role of, one of the first things. And clearly, the British and the French Navy, the British and eventually the French, who came 1600s onwards, had a much bigger naval and military size. Now, it is at this time, what about the Portuguese? The Portuguese, were clearly now being outsmarted slowly by the British and the French. Then their religious policy had also caused much, the Portuguese religious policies had also caused much disaffection with respect to Portuguese, and also led to much criticism of their presence in the region. That's why also the Mughals had partly, their opinion of the Portuguese had underwent a negative change. In the sense, their opinion of the Portuguese had underwent a negative change in this sense that their Portuguese policies of religious conversions, of bringing about forced religious conversions, caused much disaffection against their presence in the region. Competition with British. Already explained, right, that the British and the French who arrived a bit later are the ones. And then there is another aspect of their problem. The problem is that the Portuguese had firstly also corruption within their own East India Company, and there was that competition. But apart from that also, Spain and Portugal 1680 onwards decided to focus more towards South America and gave up on whom? East. Primarily they focused more on South America and they gave up on the East, primarily because they knew that the British and the French are far more powerful, and they focused on colonizing South America. Rather than 1680 onwards, they focused more on South America rather than, on the East. At the same point of time, the Portuguese, King George, I don't know which king, I'm forgetting the name, but King George IV. King George IV was the one who secured a marital alliance with the Portuguese, and the Portuguese gave Bombay as a dowry to the dowry का भी level होता है क्या आप एक कार दो कार चार कार एक बंगला दो बंगला पूरा शहर okay right. So Portuguese handed over Bombay, which was a major port in the region, to whom? To the British at this point of time. And the Portuguese from here on continued to maintain a low profile in the region, not challenging the British or the French. And as they moved away, not challenging the British and the French, you see that this is what ensured that they were allowed to maintain a presence in the region till the very last. The Portuguese were the first and also the last to leave, first to enter and the last to leave India. Okay, 1960-61, Portuguese left India. When India moved in, they threatened to move in the army into Goa. Okay, that is it. One last reason for the decline of the Portuguese is their focus on piracy. Actually, as I told you, that the Portuguese and their activities linked to piracy also saw. Now, ये पायरेसी वो वाला पायरेसी नहीं है जो आप करते हैं, ये वो बंदूक गोली वाला शिप रॉबिंग पायरेसी और पायरेट्स वो वाला है. Also saw the Mughals Mughals adopting a hard attitude towards them, or a harsh attitude, adopting a harsh attitude towards them. Harsh attitude towards them. So you get it? All these 3 or 4 are the reasons for the Portuguese decline. Now, any other question you want to ask? By and large, Portuguese is complete. Now, written? अच्छा लिखिए तो. That reminds me, what is left? I think. Just a second. Yes. Now the written. Now there are a few other things which are left. One is the cultural developments in India. ये थोड़ा सा point important है prelims के लिए. Here the Sufi wala angle is pretty important from your examination point of view. And then the Vijayanagara Empire and the Bahmani, kingdom. ये भी थोड़ा सा आपको पढ़ना है. हम्पी वाले ऐसे याद रख लीजिए. Right? So that is there. that will largely complete medieval, and then we can quickly jump on to what is left in, some peasant and social movements of the 20th century. Now, the cultural developments in India in the period from 1300s to, from 1200s to 1400s or 1500s. This is the period where you see the birth of the Sufis in a major way. Now, the Sufi movement, देखिए ये आपको पता ही है, A.R. रहमान की फोटो लगा लीजिए यहाँ, right? देखिए, the Sufi movement को actually, if it got some patronage in India, the Sufi movement got some patronage in India under whom? The Mughals. Right? It is under the Mughals that the Sufi, under whom primarily Akbar, that the Sufis got some patronage. And you see, the Sufi movement, basically, Sufis were whom? Mystics. And rejected the notion that God could be understood. कई बच्चे होते हैं ऐसा एटीट्यूड लेते हैं, मैथ्स, फिजिक्स, केमिस्ट्री, बायो, हिस्ट्री, किसी भी तरफ ये हमारी समझ के परे है. कौन? गॉड. Sufis are saying rejected the notion that God could be understood with what? Rationality. God could be understood with rationality or reason. ये हो ही नहीं सकता, आपकी समझ के परे है. God is what Sufi. आपकी समझ के और भी चीजें बहुत परे हैं, उसमें एक छोटी सी चीज is God. Right? Your parents tell you all the time, तुम्हारी समझ में नहीं आएगा अभी तुम ये ऐसी. That is what Sufis are saying about God. God is beyond reason. He cannot be understood. He, she, it cannot be understood. Okay. Rather, the only way then of connecting with God is to fall in love with God. Okay. So that's the reason why Sufi songs are popular. आपको लगता है आप अपने आशिक के लिए, you are expressing your love. But a true Sufi is expressing his love for God. It's not your roadside romance. Right. So that is what is essential about Sufism, that it argues that there is a relationship of love, and only by intense devotion and expression of one's love for God can one have a union with God. Right? Both Bhakti and Sufi are largely based on the similar idea. This idea that God cannot be simply understood, rather one gets into a connection with God by expressing one's love and affection for God. So they argued that God can only be found with love and devotion. Rabia, who died, and they were both men and women Sufi saints. Rabia was a woman Sufi saint who died in the 18th century. Another Sufi saint who is known about is Mansur bin Halaj. He also died in the 10th century. So these were some of the early Sufi saints. But a major boost to Sufism comes when? In the 13th century onwards, and more so once you see, there is some once the Mughals enter into the scene, there is more patronage for the Sufis. Mansur bin Halaj, Rabia, Mansur bin Halaj. Now, silsilas. What are silsilas? Silsilas involved often silsilas involved one Sufi saint and his followers who used to live, together in a closed community. Now here let me tell you one more thing. So firstly, silsilas were composed of a Sufi saint. Silsilas were composed of a Sufi saint and their what? Followers, who often lived in a close community that's there. Now, there were 12 major silsilas. There were 12 major Sufi saints and their groups which were known at this point of time. Most of these 12 silsilas could be divided into Bashara and Beshara. Bashara were those who, what? Bashara were those who argued for religious teachings in compliance with Sharia, whose Sufi teachings were in compliance with Sharia. And Beshara, ऐसे नहीं याद रखना है कि बेशरम, मतलब Beshara were the ones who did not comply with the Sharia. Sharia is that Muslim laws. Okay, देखिए मुझे ज़्यादा वादा नहीं पता है, ठीक है. Simple thing, Sharia, Beshara were the ones who did not comply or who did not recognize the authority of Sharia laws. Now, let me just elaborate a bit here also. Let me elaborate a bit also here about on Sufism. Do you see, it is often, do you think that Sufism was influenced by Hinduism? Yes or no? Yes, please remember from your prelims point of view, it's a correct statement that Sufism was inspired, was influenced by Hinduism as well. Hinduism / Buddhism also. ये क्यों कहते हैं हम ऐसा? I'll explain. Actually, there a number of Sufis also practice what? Controlled breathing. A number of Sufis also practice controlled, they also practice controlled breathing and this whole idea of meditation and, observing your breath, etc. Something that is often seen in Buddhism also and Hinduism also. So that's a clear example of what is considered by many as an influence of Hinduism on Sufi. Then but obviously their predominant framework is derived from Islam, but there is an influence of Hinduism or Buddhism also. They also prescribe what? देखिए जो मोदी जी ने कहा था, क्या 5 दिन के लिए वो जाते हैं और जंगल में मेडिटेशन करते हैं? मोदी जी told that he goes for 5 days and does meditation in the jungle. Simple. यही ये भी करते हैं सूफी लोग भी, मतलब भक्त सूफी सब करते हैं, right? So they also prescribed intense periods of separation and meditation. So again, many argue that this is also an influence of Buddhism. Chaliye, that's one thing as a fact you must know from your prelims point of view. देखिए आप इतना भी याद कर जाएंगे, आई हैव अ डिसेंट होप कि इसमें से अगर कुछ आएगा तो आप कर देंगे. चिश्ती एंड सोहरवादी सिलसिला, ये कहां से आए? दे आर द टू टाइप्स ऑफ सिलसिला हु आर टाइप्स ऑफ बाशरा, नॉट बेशरा. बा मतलब दे वर इन कंप्लायंस विथ शरिया. बोथ चिश्ती एंड सोहरवादी सिलसिला, they are the two most popular silsilas in South Asia. Okay. देखिए भक्ति traditions are largely of South Asian origin. Bhakti and Sufi traditions both are largely of South Asian origin. ये चिश्ती कौन से वाले चिश्ती हैं? ये मोइनुद्दीन, यस, ए आर रहमान वाले मोइनुद्दीन चिश्ती. इनको आप सलीम चिश्ती से नहीं कंपेयर करना है या कंफ्यूज करना है, वो अलग हैं. अभी हम उन पे बाद में आएंगे, उनका भी बताता हूं मैं. बट मोइनुद्दीन चिश्ती ये अल्टीमेटली वर बेस्ड आउट ऑफ अजमेर दरगाह, राइट? हाँ, ख्वाजा जी, मैं बता रहा हूं. फॉर स्प्रेडिंग, you know, this is soft power of Islam, I say. कोई मौलाना ने for the spread of Islam and for creating a positive image of Islam, no Maulana has contributed. In fact, I would say all Maulanas put together have not contributed as much for creating a positive image of Islam as who? A.R. Rahman has done through his music. And then hardline Maulanas say that Islam mein there is no place for music and dance. And the Sufis used to do both music and. अरे भाई जीवन में और रिलीजन में अगर म्यूजिक और रंग नहीं होगा तो कैसे चलेगा? Right? That much is there. Right? So this is something that people need to realize that कैसे, मतलब much before Bollywood, Hollywood, they have their own music, right? And there are many, and I mean, for example, you look, I mean, I'm forced to say this, in the Indian classical music Gharana traditions, there is a long line of Muslims who have been legendary in terms of spreading instrumental and classical music. वो तबले वाले Zakir Hussain, and that line you see there are so many other gharanas also, Shehnai wale, Bismillah Khan, and there are many others also. For almost every other classical instrument you can find one gharana or other of a Muslim origin. Okay, so ऐसा नहीं है, लेकिन as always there are reactionary elements everywhere, hardline elements everywhere. Some say कि ये नहीं है compliance में शरिया से, ये है वो है, इनको ये तो सब कर रहे हैं. ठीक, मोइनुद्दीन चिश्ती, I'll just give you time, let me just complete this. So he is based out of Ajmer, and the Ajmer Dargah is ultimately or Moinuddin Chishti. Here what is important is they argued what? They often did not interfere in state politics, or they did not keep a close association with state politics. At the same point of time, they did not keep a close association with state politics. एक और A.R. रहमान के भी बाप, A.R. रहमान अभी कुछ नहीं उनके सामने, वो नुसरत फतेह अली खान. अरे अलग लेवल है वो. राहत देखिए, राहत फतेह अली खान is a poor and a cheap copy of नुसरत फतेह अली खान. है ना? मतलब आपको, मतलब एक होता है क्लास और एक होता है pretending to be class. Okay, so Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan is class. मतलब Nusrat Ali Khan, if you see his some of the renditions etc. are more than an hour long. एक एक घंटे से भी लंबे हैं। एक तो है जो 2 घंटे का है, मैं तो सुन के, ही सिंगिंग कंटिन्यूअसली फॉर 2 hours। हर किसी के बस की बात नहीं है, राइट? सो दैट इज अ वेरी डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ अ म्यूजिक, बट नुसरत फतेह अली खान is contributed more than probably again all Maulanas put together. So one more thing about Muinuddin Chishti silsila was this, and this is another important thing from your prelims point of view. Firstly, they did not interfere in state politics or did not take any active interest in state affairs, and also followed and prescribed a life of austerity. Also followed and prescribed a life of austerity. Whom? चिश्ती सिलसिला वाले। ये सोहरवादी सिलसिला, this is based out of modern day पेशावर। मतलब पाकिस्तान में ये क्या है, दे enjoyed state patronage and secondly they did not follow a lifestyle of what? Austerity. They did not follow a lifestyle of austerity. They did not follow a lifestyle of austerity. The hardline Muslims said ये सूफी कौन है? सूफी are not Muslims. सिंपल है ये, मतलब एकदम क्लियर है. In the more hardline view of Islam, anybody who doesn't follow their rigid categorization is not a Muslim. Okay. So they're like सूफी नहीं है ये तो मुस्लिम नहीं है. Okay. ऐसा हिंदुइज्म में भी फुल ऑन है. अगर आप हमारा स्टाइल फॉलो करते हैं तो यू आर अ हिंदू, अदरवाइज यू आर नॉट अ ट्रू हिंदू. सच्चे हिंदू नहीं है. सो ऐसे भी बहुत है. अभी ये चिश्ती एंड सोहरवादी सिलसिला हो गया. एक और है, कौन? सलीम चिश्ती. कौन है सलीम चिश्ती? यस, आगरा. somebody said very rightly. कौन है भाई सलीम चिश्ती? आगरा वाले. लेकिन है कौन? ये भी बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट है प्रीलिम्स के लिए. पता चला आपने सलीम चिश्ती जी को आपने बना दिया मोइनुद्दीन चिश्ती और बोला सलीम चिश्ती इज ऑल्सो बेस्ड आउट ऑफ अजमेर. नो, इज बेस्ड आउट ऑफ आगरा. इट वॉज सलीम चिश्ती who his follower was whom? Akbar. Akbar was a follower of Salim Chishti. Upon his death, Akbar constructed a mausoleum and what is called as the Fatehpur Sikri. Because Salim Chishti used to live very close to where the Fatehpur Sikri was eventually constructed. After his death, in the memory of Salim Chishti, you see the Fatehpur Sikri and the tomb within Fatehpur Sikri of Salim Chishti was constructed. Okay. First, it was made of red sandstone. Then it was made of marble, white marble. आप जाइए, अभी कभी जाएंगे तो अंदर एक है. बाहर से तो फतेहपुर सीकरी इज मेड ऑफ रेड सैंडस्टोन. अंदर जहां पे टोम्ब है, इट इज मेड ऑफ व्हाइट मार्बल. ये भी प्रीलिम्स के लिए पता होना चाहिए. जैसे मेरी एक सजेशन है आपको लिए, आप जो भी जरूर देखिए, इंडिया में देयर आर इन्यूमरेबल नंबर ऑफ मॉन्यूमेंट्स, राइट? एंड दिल्ली में ही बहुत सारे हैं. what is very essential is that you should visit them. And you should visit them, and you should visit them not like a gamar and take selfies. Don't be a gawar, be a educated visitor. लेकिन अगर आप इंस्टाग्राम वाले भी हैं, कोई बुराई नहीं है, इंस्टाग्राम पे फोटो डालें, अपनी नहीं, मॉन्यूमेंट की, और उसके ऊपर मॉन्यूमेंट के बारे में लिखें, अपने बारे में नहीं. आप, there is for example Amit Parsicha, I follow him. He writes, he has a YouTube page, he has a Facebook page also, and one on Instagram also, India Lost and Found, where he travels. अपनी photograph नहीं, monument की and a background about the monument. अरे कुछ पढ़े लिखों वाला काम करिए, है ना. कार के साथ फोटो डालने से आप महान नहीं बन जाएंगे, ठीक है. तो और कहीं जा रहे हैं तो त्रिभंगा स्टाइल में पोज करके भी आप महान नहीं बन जाएंगे, राइट. सो या तो कुछ ऐसा बनाइए जो मॉन्यूमेंट बन जाए, वरना मॉन्यूमेंट को देखिए, राइट. सो दैट इज दैट. नाउ सलीम चिश्ती इज द वन हु इज बेस्ड. अभी निजामुद्दीन औलिया, जो ये दिल्ली वाले, हजरत निजामुद्दीन और निजामुद्दीन औलिया, अगेन ही इज अ डिसेंडेंट ऑफ हुम, सलीम चिश्ती. ओके, तो ये थोड़ा सा आपको ब्रॉड पता होना चाहिए. मोस्ट इन द नॉर्थ इज फ्रॉम द चिश्ती सिलसिला. इन द नॉर्थ वेस्ट सोहरवादी सिलसिला इज ऑल्सो देयर. नाउ भक्ति मूवमेंट. अब आ जाइए भक्ति मूवमेंट पे. Now, when you go to the Bhakti movement and Sufi movement both actually are flourishing at roughly the same time. But even the Bhakti movement had started before 13th century. Bhakti movement is also visible after the 8th century itself. The growth started after the 8th century. And as Buddhism collapsed or became increasingly difficult to differentiate from Hinduism, the Bhakti movement originated. The Bhakti movement originated. The Bhakti movement originated. ठीक है? Now, what about Nayanars and Alvars? Nayanars and Alvars. Who are these? These are bhaktis, but those bhaktis who followed what? One followed more of Vaishnavite tradition and one followed more of Shaivite traditions. Nayanars and Alvars, both are types of bhakti followers. The Vaishnavite and the Shaivite. Sorry, acha, I wrote the opposite. Bhai, language, will they be based in Sanskrit? No. Actually, here's the thing, that the Bhakti movement is largely aiming to have a wider social base, lower social classes or lower social castes as well. So, and as well as women. You know the famous Bhakti poet, saint, what's her name? Mirabai, right? So, it was open to women and lower social castes. And in terms of languages, you see the Hindi or the other local languages, what is important is not Sanskrit. The Bhakti and the Sufi traditions both are largely based in local languages, not in languages of the elites. Okay, so in that context, that's one thing. The two most important saints often talked about, Namdev and Ramananda, both are considered important Bhakti saints. And Ramananda was the major Bhakti saint, and a number of his followers carried the message of Bhakti tradition. And the message of Bhakti tradition is again the same as that of the Sufi tradition, that God cannot be understood, God can be reached through devotion and love. Okay, God cannot be understood. यहीं पर मुझे याद है बार बार स्टीफन हॉकिंग. स्टीफन हॉकिंग अलग. So Stephen Hawking said there is no God. Right? Stephen Hawking, अरे वही वो वाले, right? So, right, black hole वाले, वो सारे वाले, that, okay, so I remember this, Stephen Hawking always reminds me of Albert Einstein. What is the similarity? Don't understand anything they say in terms of their core area. So, this is that common joke that Albert Einstein met whom? Albert Einstein only wanted to meet one guy in Hollywood, and that was Charlie Chaplin. Yes, that's true. So when Albert Einstein met Charlie Chaplin, Albert Einstein told Charlie Chaplin that I am your big fan, primarily because of one reason, that you are one actor who without saying a word communicates everything, and people can connect with you beyond languages, beyond borders, beyond cultures. So that is why I am your big fan. So Charlie Chaplin said, I am your bigger fan, because you are more respected, more adored and well received everywhere in the world, even when the world understands nothing about what you say. So that's the kind of thing. That is the thing with Stephen Hawking. I understand nothing about what he says, but he has definitely said something of some significance, जो एक कॉमन आदमी की बुद्धि के ऊपर की बात है, मतलब कुछ बड़ा ही कहा होगा. कई लोग बात इतनी छोटी करते हैं. Indian politicians believe that we are fools, that Mamata Banerjee will protect democracy. If Mamata Banerjee is a protector of democracy, then Modi ji is a protector of secularism. इसमें कोई doubt नहीं है मुझे. Okay. Mamata Banerjee is as much a supporter of democracy as Modi ji is a supporter of secularism. और हमारे माथे पे क्या नहीं लिखा है? Right. So, and I went to Yogendra Yadav's talk 2-3 days ago, and Yogendra Yadav saying the same thing. That, I mean, that this whole Mahagathbandhan business, That's there. Now today, you follow that page, I follow that page, Humans of Hindutva. So they did a very good comparison. They said BJP is like bidi, Congress is like cigarette, and uh, Trinamool Congress etc. is like vape. वो इलेक्ट्रॉनिक वाली, राइट, है सब हानिकारक. कौन कितनी हानिकारक है, डिबेट बस यही है. Indian politicians are out competing themselves in proving who is more stupid and more toxic than the other. The competition is not who is better, the competition who is worse actually. So कोई नहीं, लेकिन ऐसे ही होता है. Ravidas, Kabir and Sadhna, all of these, Ravidas is what? Of which origin? Cobbler origin. Tabhi Sant Ravidas, often when it's talked about, he is considered a bhakti saint, primarily of a lower caste origin. Ravidas Jayanti hoti hai, right? And this is often celebrated by whom? The lower caste, because Ravidas himself came from the lower caste. Kabir, ye weaver and partly of of a Muslim. देखिए तो ऐसे ही होता है ऐसे लोगों के साथ. Kabir was apparently born in a Muslim family. Her mother basically left her, and he was taken care of by a Hindu family. तो ना ये पूरे हिंदू हो पाए, ना ये मुसलमान, बीच में रह गए. ऐसे लोगों की आजकल कोई जरूरत नहीं है. इनको यही नहीं क्लियर है कि ये हिंदू है कि मुस्लिम. ना हिंदू ऐसे लोग चाहते हैं, ना मुसलमान. सब चाहते हैं कि हमारे खेमे में हो या नहीं हो, right? That is there. So cobbler, weaver and sadhana, I'm not really sure about their origin, but these are some people of lower caste, lower class origins who revolutionized the bhakti and the Sufi traditions. Okay, that's there about their ideas and teachings. Anything that you want to ask here? Huh? What was the work of silsilas? Was that the silsilas were like cults. The silsilas were like cults in the sense that they helped in spreading the ideas of the bhakti traditions, and they would often operate from a base. That's it. Now, Vijayanagara and Bahamanis. Last thing to be discussed. The Vijayanagara Empire is the one that you notice in saffron, and the Bahamanis are the one whom you notice in green. Okay, and they are where? In South India. At what time? Before Aurangzeb. Dekhiye, what is happening is that eventually, they are prevalent in which period? The 1300 to 1500 period. 1500 mein Akbar is firstly consolidating in north, and then Aurangzeb expanding to south. Now, before Aurangzeb's expansion, the Bahamani is the major power in the Deccan region. And this Bahamani and Vijayanagara Empire will give way to other powers. Who? Bijapur, Golconda, Marathas and Mysore. It is from Vijayanagara Empire that Mysore originated as a state. Okay. It is from Bahamani that you have Bijapur, Golconda originating as states. When Aurangzeb had to deal with Deccan, there was no Bahamani. Bahamanis had collapsed already. But in place of Bahamani, there were Bijapur, there was Golconda. In place of Vijayanagara, there was Mysore. Okay, so that's it. They are the predecessors of Mysore or Bijapur or Golconda or the Marathas. That's the first context. Okay, because Marathas are visible when 1600s onwards, and so are what Mysore and other Bijapur and Golconda, and it is they who 1300s to 1500s that Bahamanis and the Vijayanagara Empire were the ones. Let's now actually there's one more thing that you must know as a context first. While in the north, while the Tughlaqs and the Khiljis were trying to consolidate themselves and had a lot of fighting, between the Rajputs and the Tughlaqs, etc. You see that in South India there was a period of relative stability. And South India continued to flourish as the North dealt with a number of new players like the Afghans and the conflict between the Afghans and the Rajputs for that matter. South India flourished, and why do we say South India flourished? Because in this period in the Vijayanagara Empire you see again more temples. And that could not happen unless and until there was a flourishing of trade or other kinds of activities in the region. So that is why we say that even trade and other kinds of economic activities flourished in the south as the north was gripped by political conflicts and instability. Okay, so that's there. Now, this is something that you need to know. One of the reasons why the Portuguese did get to establish a window also is why? Because the Mughals were yet to consolidate themselves. The Portuguese came before whom? The Portuguese came before there is Babur, and before they came 1526 Babur is coming. Portuguese are coming when? 1498. The Portuguese had managed to arrive when? Before the arrival of Mughals. And that is something that helped them to consolidate their presence in the region, because there is no strong central player. When did the British consolidate themselves? When the Mughals declined. Right? So you've got to understand that outside players often got a window either when there was no strong player at the center, or the strong player at the center had undergone a what? Decline. Clear? Chaliye, likhiye. Bahamanis and Vijayanagara Empire. So in South India, we often argue that the Bahamanis in the Deccan region and the Vijayanagara Empire the Krishna Empire in the Krishna region onwards Bahamanis in the Deccan region and Vijayanagara Empire in the Krishna region onwards were the predominant powers of South India, were the predominant powers of South India were the predominant powers of South India while the north was gripped with political instability and conflicts. with political instability and conflicts. The Vijayanagara Empire, but देखिए अभी क्या है, बहामनी और विजयनगरा के बीच में there is love? No. History tells you one thing, neighbors often have a conflicting relationship with each other than an amicable one. And the same is with the Bahamanis and the Vijayanagaras. And their contest was over controlling which region? Their contest was actually over controlling, their contest was often over controlling this region, okay, the Golconda region, and also this is the basin for a number of rivers, Krishna, Godavari, Tungabhadra. All this region was a delta region, and their conflict was over controlling this region between whom? The Bahamanis and the Vijayanagara Empire. They often involved a fighting over the control of this region, the Warangal region, and predominantly the regions where there is the delta of the Krishna and the Godavari. So that's one of the things that you also need to know, that the Vijayanagara Empire formed in 1346 and the Bahamani Kingdom formed in 1347 often had repeated prolonged conflicts over expansion of their presence in the Krishna Godavari delta and the Tungabhadra region. The Bahamani Kingdom of 1347. The Bahamani Kingdom was formed in 1347. Now, ultimately, when the Portuguese arrive, when the Portuguese arrive on the scene, it is at this time that the Bahamanis were partly actually in their decline. And this allowed the Portuguese to easily establish themselves in the regions, whether that was Goa, which was largely under their control before the Portuguese arrived. Now, the peak of the Vijayanagara Empire, we say, it was under Krishna Dev Raya. There were other rulers also, but the peak of the Vijayanagara Empire, we say, is often under Krishna Dev Raya, whose contributions to the in the sense that there is the growth of a new town, city by the name of Vijayanagara itself, right? And in terms of literature also, there is a certain degree of there is Krishna Dev Raya. किस चीज के लिटरेचर के लिए जाने जाते हैं? Anybody? Telugu literature. What about Kannada? Amogh Varsha. Kannada literature. Amogh Varsha is known for Kannada literature, and Krishna Dev Raya is predominantly known for the growth of Telugu literature, and not just Telugu. Actually, you see, Tamil and Telugu often are partly seen as originating from a similar base. Tamil and Telugu often are seen originating from a similar base. If you see, Tamil, Telugu and Kannada are very, I mean, if somebody knows one language fluently, it is relatively easier for them to make sense of the other three languages. Malayali is very different, but Tamil, Telugu and Kannada, there is a certain degree of similarity also between the two. So indirectly that helped in the growth of other languages also, but predominantly the growth of Telugu literature, because Krishnadev Raya himself wrote a number of works in the Telugu literature. That is also something that you must know. Now, what about the Battle of Banihati? Now, this Battle of Banihati is considered very important, primarily why? Because of the reason that it was in this battle that the conflict between Bahamanis and whom? Vijayanagara Empire was settled, and it was their long-standing rivalry was settled in favor of whom? The Vijayanagara Empire. The Bahamanis were outsmarted by the Vijayanagara Empire in this battle of Banihati. Firstly, but this ultimately was not, it initially seemed in this battle that, Vijayanagara Empire will outsmart, Bahamanis. It did seem eventually that, but eventually the Bahamanis did manage to outsmart Vijayanagara. So what you need to remember from your prelims point of view specifically, that just जो concluding line आपको याद रखनी है वो यही है, that it is in the battle of Banihati that eventually, what actually I'm not telling you to the details, because the rulers of Bijapur, Golconda, Warangal, they joined hands with the Bahamanis against the Vijayanagara Empire after initially Vijayanagara Empire started winning. The result was that they formed a Mahagathbandhan. Who? The Bahamanis along with the other smaller local rulers in the Warangal region, against whom? Vijayanagara, and managed to subdue the Vijayanagara Empire. So please remember from your prelims point of view that in the battle of Banihati, the Bahamanis along with Warangal subdued the Vijayanagara Empire, which eventually contributed to its decline. Which eventually contributed to its decline. Now, which eventually contributed to its decline. Now, विजयनगरा एम्पायर एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव स्ट्रक्चर, देखिए आपको बस एक जो टर्म याद रखना है, दैट इज अबाउट पलाई अगर्स. ओके, व्हाट डज दैट मीन? पलाई अगर्स बेसिकली meant those who were responsible for those who were military chiefs. Again, this is the term for those military chiefs who were granted a land. It's actually the term very similar to Mansabdari. Okay, so Palaigars or Nayaks were the guns. Who were they? They were military chiefs. Often granted what? Granted a land. Were military chiefs often granted a land? Were military chiefs often granted a land right, or often granted land rights, often granted land rights, and the revenue generated from which would be used for Maintenance of troops. आर्किटेक्चर, आर्किटेक्चर में क्या है भाई? What is this? Horse driven chariot. Hampi. This horse driven chariot is found where? Hampi. And this is another photograph of the same horse driven. This is another photograph of Hampi. Okay, both of them are photographs of Hampi, and they are considered exquisite for their carving out and their style. And their style is which style? Sorry, not horse driven, elephant driven. ये एलिफेंट है, थोड़ा एलिफेंट का साइज छोटा है, बट एलिफेंट है. Okay, so that's there. Now one of the things is the style is neither Dravida nor Nagara. It's a mixture of both, which is the Vesara style that is found in Hampi. Okay, one more thing is ancient में Monday I'll be taking that class in the morning 8 to 2 for in the crash course for that the QEP wala, that for ancient, where we had stopped, from where I'll take in on Monday. Okay, that's there. Tomorrow ma'am is taking class. Okay, and you will get a mail if needed. I'll also take a class after that. Now basically what we're going to begin with very soon is going to be a discussion. Modern Indian history is complete, right? अभी ये medieval भी आपको हो गया. अभी क्या? World history. World history is something that we'll be starting off very soon. Probably either this week itself or next week. Somewhere we'll start off with world history, and that's something which is important from your mains point of view. And I personally think there will be 2-3 questions this time in the mains from world history, because पिछले साल कुछ नहीं आया. जब कुछ नहीं आया, so that is the time when people become complacent कि अरे इस बार नहीं आया तो अगली बार भी नहीं आएगा, मतलब अगली बार जरूर आएगा. Okay, so world history का नंबर आएगा. So that is there. So there will be, in my hunch, out of 3 things, there will be a question in world history this year. One is on either the communist revolution or the Chinese decolonization, or one could say opium war, ये सारी जो भी चीजें हैं चाइना में, communist revolution, opium wars, whatever. Either a question will come from there, or from French Revolution, or from either from French Revolution or from communism and China, or World War I. Definitely very high chance, 100 years of World War I. So ये तो आ ही सकते हैं इन तीनों में से कुछ ना कुछ. Now the next thing, one more thing is in the polity portion, I will be discussing with you the governance वाला section. Okay, largely the governance वाला section, मतलब वो वाला मसाले वाला क्या, for example electoral reforms, CAG, वो सब तो ठीक है. उसके बाद लोकपाल, लोकायुक्ता, CBC, CVC, CBI और गुड गवर्नेंस, सिटीजन चार्टर, ई गवर्नेंस, ये सारी चीजें जिन्हें कोई नहीं पूछता, उन्हें UPSC, because they are very essential to tackle corruption and good governance. अभी आपको जब आप गवर्नेंस पढ़ेंगे उसके बाद समझ में आएगा आपका किस लेवल पे काटा जा रहा है. कि people say we will tackle corruption by how? By weakening RTI, by not introducing citizens charter, by doing nothing in terms of substantive evolution of e-governance, you will tackle corruption. But how? कैसे? मोदी जी का फोटो लगाएंगे, करप्ट आदमी डर जाएगा. That don't do corruption, मोदी जी आ जाएंगे. That is how you will tackle corruption. Or tackling corruption requires systemic institutional reforms. And that is about all those things that we'll discuss. So, so from the, if not this weekend, from the coming weekend onwards, हम वहाँ CAG, Election Commission, उन सारी चीजों से चालू, we'll have a discussion, and then moving onwards towards governance, good governance, corruption, civil services, corruption in civil services reforms, वो वहाँ lateral entry in civil services, ये और सही है, मतलब बिल्कुल ही बेशर्म होगी सरकार. Okay. नहीं, लेकिन हम वो लिखेंगे जो हमें एग्जाम में लिखना है. So that is that. चलिए, largely this completes your medieval portion. Let me discuss one last thing here, and that is about 20th century tribal and peasant movements. 20th century, did we not discuss tribal movements also? कर दिया है. Peasant, social, peasant movements also we have done. एक सेकंड, हाँ, एक सेकंड, प्लीज वेट. जून बैच वाले बच्चे पहले बताएं हाथ उठा के, है ना, जो मैं पूछूंगा. In the June batch, did we discuss the peasant movements, 20th century? Okay. In the 20th century, did we in the peasant movements we discussed Bardoli? Bardoli we discussed. Okay. Telangana Tebaga? No. Bardoli we discussed, but Telangana Tebaga we have not discussed. Then we would not have discussed Bardoli also. Bardoli we have discussed, but not Telangana Tebaga. Okay. ठीक है. And okay. What about जुलाई में? कोई बात नहीं, तो ठीक है, अभी कर लेंगे. What about Justice Party? ये तो कहीं नहीं हुआ होगा. So please discuss. Let's first start with social movements of the 20th century. Huh? जिसका हो गया वो रिवाइज कर ले, जिसका नहीं हुआ वो सुन ले. ठीक है, सिंपल. सोशल मूवमेंट ऑफ 20th century. Here Justice Party is there. There is also what? Certain temple entry movements, and these are happening when? 1920s. And there are what are also called as the self-respect movement, and there is also what is called as the Mahad water tank agitation or the Mahad agitation. Of 1927. हो सकता है इसमें से कुछ हुआ हो, कुछ नहीं हुआ हो. Then I am और कुछ भी नहीं हुआ हो. And then also we'll talk about some women, All India Women's Conference and all those things. Okay. Now, Justice Party was formed in 1916 by the Dravidians in the Dravidian region, in the what you see as the Madras region today. What did the Dravidian? Why was the Justice Party formed? To oppose the domination of the Sanskrit and Hindi speaking Brahminical, upper Brahminical caste groups. Actually, in Madras, for example, the Brahmins, in Madras, for example, the Tamil Brahmins, the Brahmins constituted 10% of the population, but dominated over, had a control over 50% of the government jobs and higher education. So, the Dravidians were whom? The Dravidians were the ones who were non-Sanskrit speaking, non-Sanskrit or non-Hindi speaking population. And it does not mean that Dravidians were always poor. No, it's not that the Dravidians were always poor, but they were non-Sanskrit speaking and non-Hindi speaking groups. A number of them, and they lacked a major share or lagged, they are the majority population, but they were the majority population, and a number of them were also big landowners. Jaise kaun? A number of them were themselves big landowners. For example, whom? A number of them were also big landowners. Jaise who? What can you think of? Reddys. Right? In the Andhra region, the coastal big landowners, for example, the Reddys, were themselves Dravidians. Or you even see in Kerala, just like you have the Nayars, which are today considered upper class, they were also non-Brahmins, okay, to begin with. So these big dominant landowners who were non-Brahminical formed their party, which was the Justice Party. What was their demand? It was formed in 1960. The Justice Party's demand was what? Justice Party's demand was what? That there must be what? Assured political representation or separate electorates. Separate electorates. For whom? For Dravidians. They must have reservation in the legislative council and jobs. So they formed the party in 1916, and the 1919, what is happening? The Government of India Act 1919 was there, and this Government of India Act 1919, if you remember, I have told before also, they extended separate electorates to Dravidians also, who are not a religious minority but are actually a linguistic minority, because of their poor representation in government jobs, etc., and in political life. Ultimately, the Justice Party contested elections in 1990. Contested elections in 1919. This is important from your prelims examination point of view. But by 1924, the Justice Party had actually lost popularity. Why? Because the big landowners appropriated the gains for themselves without passing off or without taking any steps for the benefits of the masses. So what emerged in 1924? The Justice Party had lost out popular support. And you see the rise of a third group. देखिए, Congress did not contest the 1919 election. Justice Party did, but Justice Party also lost out on popularity by 1924. Who emerged? The self-respect movement. The self-respect movement was Dravidian in origin and was started by whom? E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, or also called as Periyar. E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, or also called as Periyar. Okay. E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, or also called as Periyar. Then he started the self-respect movement and argued that before self-rule. Now, what is actually Ramaswamy Naikar? Himself was a member of Congress. In 1924, Naikar, who is also known as Periyar today, resigned from Congress. Why? Because he said that Congress is a party dominated by the upper caste. Congress is a party dominated by upper caste and did little to do what? To tackle social ills like untouchability or that of the caste system. So he said that Congress cannot solve the problems of social evils. It is a party dominated by the upper caste. He resigned from the Congress in 1924 and started the self-respect movement. And he argued, ये जो आजादी की बात कर रहे हैं, before self-rule must come self-respect. What will this political freedom from British will mean nothing if we cannot abolish social discrimination and social inequality in the society. He said that before self-rule, what we should first do is that everybody who argues for freedom from British, before arguing for freedom, people should argue for their own self-respect and self-respect against the discrimination of the caste system. So, Periyar argued that before attaining political freedom, it was necessary to attain social freedom, or before self-rule, self-respect was necessary. Before attaining political freedom, it was necessary to attain social freedom, or before self-rule, self-respect was necessary. Next, Periyar is saying what? That Periyar is a radical social reformer. He was a radical social reformer. How? Because he argued for abolition of caste system. मतलब ये आर्य समाज वाला पोजीशन नहीं ले रहे हैं, reform of caste system or anything. He is saying abolish the caste system in totality. He organized public burning of Manu Smritis. He organized public burning of Manu Smriti. He organized public burning of Manu Smriti, which is the religious book, which was the religious book which often sanctioned caste differentiation. or which prescribed different punishments for different caste groups for the same crime. So they said that such kind of ideas of Manusmriti go against the idea of equality before the law and go against the idea of creating an equal society. So the public burning of Manusmriti was also organized by them. Also, what did they do? Apart from abolition of caste system and public burning of Manu Smriti, one more thing is there. What? Abolition of caste system, public burning of Manu Smriti. There is another thing that they also supported was temple entry movement. For whom? Lower castes. That lower castes will be allowed to visit the same temples operated and visited by the upper caste must be. So they started temple entry movements also. And last thing that they also supported was the lifting of restrictions on women. Because again Periyar argued the same thing, that women are also treated as lower caste under the whole caste system. So lifting of restrictions on women is also with respect to their temple entry, etc. They were also something that they talked about. Who? Periyar and his self-respect movement. It is Periyar's self-respect movement which assumed a lot of popularity in the South, and that is why social reforms started, and in the South much ahead of North. And at the same point of time, in the 20th century, it is the birth of the Dravidian movement often traced to whom? Periyar. It is this Periyar's Dravidian movement which later takes the form of DMK and AIA DMK. Both are Dravidian political parties who largely argue that they adhere by the ideas of Periyar. Okay, that's about the self-respect movements. Next, Mahad agitation. Temple entry movement. So, theek hai, Mahad agitation. That's the last one. Is a major social reform movement started by whom? Ambedkar. I have told before also. This was started in the Mahad district, where in Maharashtra. Now, what was the demand? Dekhiye, the demand of this movement started by Ambedkar. Ambedkar, with roughly 5,000 of his followers, started the Mahad water tank agitation. Their demand was that lower caste individuals must be granted equal access to draw water from the same wells, water tanks or rivers used by upper caste. Why? Because often the better water sources, the more pure, the clean water sources, the upper caste reserved for themselves. And they said that the lower caste can't use these water sources. Why? Because the lower castes are polluted, they will pollute the water. Okay. And the upper, and this will hamper, the life and livelihood of the upper caste. So their ideas were based on purity and pollution, and which denied them access to drinking water, safe drinking water facilities also. That is why Ambedkar argued that the position of a dog is better than the position of a lower caste individual in the Hindu society, because even a dog can drink water from the same river stream, but not the lower caste individual. So he started the Mahad agitation demanding equal access, and ultimately this was granted following a British intervention and a mass public protest that they actually carried out here in 1927. So that is what was about Mahad water tank or Mahad agitation. one of the biggest backward caste movements of the early 20th century. Next, so these are some of the social movements that you must know about. Now, what about a few other things here? One of the few other things that you must know is about the peasant movements of the 20th century. The peasant movements of the 20th century, the Mappila, 1920-21, the Bardoli, in case I have discussed, well and good, if not, 1926, then the Telangana and movement of 1947-1948, and also the Tebhaga movement of 1944 to 1946. How many of these have we discussed? None. Okay. So, how many we have discussed? One of this? Bardoli. Okay. तो चलिए वो आप सुन लीजिए. बाकी you can बाकी if we have not discussed, so we're discussing it here. Mappila actually is happening. तो एक तो पहले आपको ये पता होना चाहिए, जो मैंने शायद पहले बताया हो चाहे ना बताया हो, that the UP Kisan Sabha was formed in 1916 by whom? Mr. Shukla and Mr. Dwivedi. Indra Narayan Shukla. नारायण शुक्ला एंड इंद्र द्विवेदी, जो भी है नारायण, अरे मैं तो ऐसे मिस्टर शुक्ला एंड मिस्टर द्विवेदी, they formed the UP Kisan Sabha in 1916 and they played a proactive role in picking up peasant issues during the non-cooperation movement in 1920-21. Similarly, there is another Kisan Sabha, All India Kisan Sabha. All India Kisan Sabha formed in 1936. Sahajanand, Saraswati and N.D. Ranga, they formed the All India Kisan Sabha in 1936, which was a pan-Indian organization, Indian umbrella organization, to bring together all peasant groups. All India Kisan Sabha. Okay, and what did they do? They influenced Congress policies on peasant issues in the 1937 elections. Remember? We discussed that in 1937 Congress government was elected in a number of provinces and they decreased the land revenue rates by 50%, all those things. So those demands are coming from where? The All India Kisan Sabha. ये दोनों आपको पता होना chahiye. These are the two organizations that you must know about. Written? Okay, right. First you write, then we'll go to a few other names. नहीं तो अच्छी क्वालिटी है.
क्विक रिस्पॉन्स दिया.
ठीक. This was the culprit. हटा ही देते थे. अब कोई दिक्कत नहीं. Now, next. Written? चलिए. Now, let's start one by one with Mapila. In case you know, well and good. Otherwise, just hear it out. देखिए, Mapila revolt actually, so Mapila was in कहाँ? Kerala region, and during the non-cooperation movement, what in the Kerala region, and during the non-cooperation movement, they are starting this Mapila revolt. Primarily, it is a peasant issue, where most of the landlords were big. Most of the landlords were big zamindars, and most of the landlords were big zamindars, and most of the peasants were most of the landlords were actually Hindu zamindars, and most of the peasants were Muslim landless farmers. Now, actually, the zamindars, just like they are zamindars, what zamindars do? The zamindars tried to extract high rates of revenue, and this was opposed by peasants. The Congress supported the Mapila revolt initially, but the zamindars did not respond to the demands of peasants, nor did the British government intervene. Ultimately, the movement turned violent, and the movement turned violent and took the form of what? took the form of a religious riot. So what did Congress do? Congress withdrew support. Congress withdrew support. Congress withdrew support from Mapila. Congress withdrew support from Mapila. So Congress withdrew support from Mapila revolt. So please remember, prelims के लिए आपको क्या remember, याद क्या रखने वाली चीज है? That what is the issue? Is the movement violent or non-violent? It was initially non-violent, then turned violent. And who supported them? Congress supported them, Communists supported them, whatever. The Congress supported initially, but then withdrew the revolt. The British cracked down on the Mapila revolt with the use of force. Congress withdrew its support as the movement turned violent. And it is happening when? During the non-cooperation movement. Where? In the Kerala or the Malabar region. Bardoli, written, if you have not written also, you will find it in the PowerPoint presentation. Otherwise, if you written, if you have written, you write from your neighbor's copy. Yes. It will be uploaded. I'll just get it uploaded today. Now, Bardoli. What is Bardoli saying? Bardoli is in Gujarat. It was for this revolt, it was for the Bardoli Satyagraha that happened under Gandhi and Patel's leadership. That Patel's leadership was important, and Patel was given the title of Sardar for his role in the Bardoli Satyagraha. The issue was that the British government proposed a 1/3 or roughly around 30% hike in land revenue rates. But there was no major increase in productivity or income. But still the government was proposing a 1/3 hike in revenue rates, increasing the burden of taxation on the peasantry. So British government proposed a 1/3 or 30% hike in land revenue rates. A 1/3 hike in land revenue rates. And despite no increase in agricultural despite no increase in agricultural productivity. So so firstly it was Gandhi who visited and then appointed Patel to lead the protests. Ultimately Vallabhbhai Patel organized no rent strikes and said that no rent strikes, saying that no taxes would be paid to the British till they call of the hike. Ultimately, the British government appointed a committee, no rent strikes, and they also said that there will be a social boycott of anybody who paid these taxes to British. Social boycott of anyone who paid taxes to whom? British. So the British government ultimately organized a committee to look into peasant demands, and this committee recommended a This committee recommended a 5% hike in revenue demand. So we say that the Bardoli Satyagraha actually succeeded. The Bardoli Satyagraha actually succeeded. The Bardoli Satyagraha actually succeeded in meeting its demand, and it was what? A non-violent Satyagraha. And Congress again. So please remember, will the Bardoli Satyagraha demand abolition of zamindari? No. वही बात है, वो option कभी टिक नहीं करना है. They are opposing the proposed revenue hikes. That's there. Written. So Bardoli also we did. Telangana and Tibhaga. Two more. Between you and Azadi. अरे पटेल साहब लीड कर रहे, गांधी बैठे हुए उसे करा रहे. Next is Tibhaga and Telangana. First, Tibhaga happened in northern Bengal, led by whom? It involved the lower caste farmers of tribal origin. Rajbanshi tribe. What is the Tibhaga movement? देखिए, in the Tibhaga movement actually happened in North Bengal. What was their demand? Their demand was the implementation of the flood or the flood, both it's called, the Flood Commission recommendation. What was the Flood Commission recommendation? Actually, I'll come to that in a minute. Now, the issue was that the total produce was divided, the produce was often divided into two parts. One part went to whom? The zamindar or the jagirdar, and one part went to whom? The bargadar or the peasant. 50-50. Britannia 50-50. 50% to the peasant and 50% to the zamindar. This is how the total produce was often shared between the zamindar and the peasant. 50-50. But the Flood Commission had recommended that this must be changed. The total produce must be divided not in two parts but in three parts. Somebody is happy. Now, the Flood Commission recommended that the total produce to be divided in what? Three parts. where there will be one part to be given to whom? The zamindar, and two parts must be given to the peasant. One part to the zamindar and two parts to the peasant. So what will this do? Here the ratio is half is to half. Here the ratio will become 2/3 is to 1/3. So what is the Flood Commission recommending? The ratio of zamindar must be decreased from 1/2 to 1/3. CSAT. Simple. Zamindar ka ratio must be decreased from 1/2 to 1/3. 3 bhag, te bhaga. 2 parts to the peasant and 1 parts to the zamindar. That is what is the demand of the Tebhaga movement. It is supported by whom? The communists. सिंपल बात है, कम्युनिस्ट होगा तो वायलेंट होगा, नॉन वायलेंट? वायलेंट. It turned violent. Congress has no role with the Tebhaga movement. The movement was not very successful. This movement was not very successful, though they demanded the implementation of the Flood Commission, which was a government appointed commission, the implementation of its report. Okay, that is what, ये prelims में question आया हुआ है Tebhaga पे. There was a question before on Tebhaga movement. What was the issue of the Tebhaga movement? Increase the share of the peasant from 1/2 to 2/3. No, it wasn't implemented. Last, Telangana has got nothing to do with the creation of a Telangana. As I always say, है ना? या नहीं आपने पता चला ऑप्शन में तेलंगाना मूवमेंट वाज डिमांडिंग द क्रिएशन ऑफ तेलंगाना, आपने मार दिया. The Telangana movement was based in the region of Telangana. That is why it is called as. What was the issue? It is a peasant issue. The Telangana movement was actually led by whom? Led by communists. तो भाई क्या होगा ये? Violent. इन्होंने क्या बोला? That we will bring about radical redistribution of क्या? Land. Radical redistribution of land. To whom? Peasant. Radical redistribution of land to peasants. Radical redistribution of land to peasants. कैसे, कहां से आएगी? नई लैंड बना देंगे क्या? How will? Where will the land come from? Take away from zamindar and moneylender. Simple idea है. They went village after village. At their peak, their influence extended to 3,000 villages in the Telangana region. Simple idea, go to the zamindar's house, burn his land record, go to moneylender house, burn his money lending records. If they oppose, kill them also. Simple. And जब land record ही नहीं है तो land है ही नहीं जमींदार का. Land, the tiller who lived on the land belonged to him. If zamindar opposes, kill the zamindar. Simple. इतना आसान है, देख लिया आपने. So that is what they are doing. They forcibly burnt land and revenue records of zamindars and moneylenders. So do you think it is going to be successful? Yes or no? Yes. It was a successful movement. In more than 3,000 villages, they redistributed land in the Telangana region. At its peak, affected 1 million people in the region, if they are going to be successful, will the communists become popular? Yes. Increase the popularity of the communists in the region. In fact, a large number of these communist fighters, the communists also recruited a large number of women as armed fighters. Women were also given training and they were also recruited in large numbers where? Within these communist armed guerrilla groups who took actions against zamindars and money lenders. Women also formed a part of this armed grouping. This is the reason that in the Telangana region the communists were popular and continue to be popular to this day, in the sense that 90% of the top Maoist leadership comes only from one region, that is the Telangana region. Even today, okay, that shows their popularity, something that they've managed to hold on to in this region because of the positive redistribution of land that they brought about. हो गया ये भी, रुक जाइए थोड़ा सा महिलाओं के बारे में जानते हुए आगे जाइए. Last few things about some women organizations. Did we discuss All India Women's Conference? Okay. So देखिए 3-4 आपको नाम पता होने चाहिए. One, the Women India Association, ये तो पता है? Yes or no? No, ये भी नहीं पता है. तो ये देख लीजिए. Women India Association. देखिए कई चीजें छूट जाती हैं, उन्हीं को छोटी छोटी चीजों को हम जो बिखरी हुई उन्हें we are collecting them together. Women India Association formed by anybody? Margaret Cousins and Annie Besant. Formed in 1917, the Women India Association argued for what? Voting rights for women, property rights and inheritance rights for women. It is, who is a member of the Women India Association? Sarojini Naidu. Sarojini Naidu was a member. They are the founders. Sarojini Naidu is the member who led the women delegation demanding what? Voting rights to the Montagu-Chelmsford Committee. लेके रहेंगे. Getting voting rights. Who? Women. 1917. Right? We discussed in 1919 Act, Government of India Act 1919, women are getting the voting rights for the very first time. After whose representation? Sarojini Naidu. That's about what? Women India Association. Then there is another group, All India Women's Conference. All India Women's Conference, 1927. All India Women's Conference. This was a pan-Indian organization. This is a pan-Indian organization of women leaders. The pan-Indian organization of women leaders, and one of its its founding director and member is again whom you see there one of the initial founders was also Annie Besant. Okay, Annie Besant was one of the initial founders of the All India Women's Conference, but in 1936 you see one very important individual. Her name is what? Anybody? She became the president of the All India Women's Conference. सरोजिनी नायडू नहीं है, कमला देवी चट्टोपाध्याय. देखिए कमला देवी चट्टोपाध्याय जो हैं, she was a very important Congress leader. Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay was an important Congress leader, but she was a prominent feminist. इनको ये दिक्कत है. She is afflicted by the disease called feminism, right? So she is a prominent feminist individual. She became the president of the All India Women's Conference also. After independence, she is also known for her contribution to what? Music, literature, the formation of the Sahitya Academy and the Sangeet Natak Academy all owe to her work. Not just music literature, also the setting up of textile cooperative groups where in what you know as modern day Faridabad is also carried out by Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay. So Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay was a feminist leader, talked about women rights also, and after independence also in arts, literature, also in drama. कहाँ? ड्रामा में क्या? The formation of N National School of Drama, that is also done under the leadership of Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay. तो देखिए क्या होता है, पढ़े लिखे लोगों के आने से फ्रीडम मूवमेंट में क्या बनता है? साहित्य अकेडमी, संगीत नाटक अकेडमी, ड्रामा स्कूल, कोऑपरेटिव, ऐसे सारे काम होते हैं. जब अनपढ़ लोग सरकार में आते हैं तो क्या बनता है? कुछ नहीं बनता है, वो भी नहीं बनता है, वो भी नहीं बनता है. काफी लोग ये कहते हैं कि मायावती ने स्टैच्यू बनाए और खुश हो रहे हैं कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने ऐसा कहा. कोई पटेल का भी पैसा मांग ले. पटेल का स्टैच्यू ठीक है, मायावती का क्यों नहीं है ठीक? क्योंकि मायावती ने अपना स्टैच्यू खुद बनाया. यही लॉजिक है बस, अपना स्टैच्यू खुद नहीं बनाना. अभी किसका भी बनेगा स्टैच्यू? क्या नाम है उनका? बाला साहेब ठाकरे बने. बिल्कुल, तो वही कह रहा हूं ना, सबका स्टैच्यू बनना चाहिए. और कुछ बने ना बने देश में, बाला साहेब ठाकरे के नाम पे यूनिवर्सिटी ना बने, मेडिकल कॉलेज ना बन जाए, मुफ्त इलाज ना हो जाए, वो भी हो जाए, इसमें क्या बुराई है? हाँ, अरे ये इनके रिकमेंडेशन से क्या होता है पहली बात, और दूसरा सबके नाम पे ऊंची से ऊंची इमारत बने, ये हमारी दिली तमन्ना. क्योंकि स्कूल, अस्पताल, ये सब बहुत हैं भारत में. इन लोगों के नाम पे भी बन सकते हैं स्कूल, अस्पताल, बट इसके लिए वो तो चल ही रहे हैं ऑब्वियसली. अभी बस जो एक कमी रह गई भारत में, वो सबके स्टैच्यू नाम के. बहुत सारे और भी लीडर हैं, सब अपने अपने बनाते रहे, ममता अपना बना ले। पंजाब में नहीं है कोई स्टैचू, एक वहां पंजाब वाले भी किसी को ढूंढ ले, कोई तो होगा, भगत सिंह का स्टैचू बना दे। अगला ये हो सकता है, ऐसे ऐसे हर जगह स्टैचू बना ले, ये मेरा भी रिकमेंडेशन है। पर ये स्टैचू भी नहीं बना पाई, ये तो ड्रामा व्रामा का स्कूल बना गई। ओके, तो कोई नहीं। सो दिस इज अबाउट कमला देवी चट्टोपाध्याय, लार्जली कंप्लीट्स योर टॉपिक अबाउट विमेन। एक इंसान जिनकी मैं इसलिए इज्जत करता हूं, इसलिए नहीं क्योंकि उनके व्यूज की, लेकिन वो डरते नहीं है किसी से। कटजू जब रिटायर हो चुके हैं, ना वो किसी ट्रिब्यूनल में है, ना वो कहीं बैठे हैं, उनको कोई और पोस्ट है नहीं, तो कटजू साहब एकदम खुल के बोलते हैं। जब बाला साहेब ठाकरे डाइड, द ओनली पर्सन हु एनी नेशनल डेली रोट समथिंग अगेंस्ट बाला साहेब ठाकरे वाज कटजू। भारत में on his death, if somebody, I remember because I was looking at the newspapers then, कि कौन लिखता है, either a number of people were silent or everybody praised, but कटजू अकेले निकल पड़े। अभी कटजू ने एक और काम किया है, वो किसी इंडियन न्यूज़पेपर is not published, but another, that कटजू wrote a letter to Mr. Gogoi asking 4 questions। कटजू को एकदम खुल के, एकदम आपकी कटजू एकदम, आई एम नॉट सेइंग वन में अग्री और डिसएग्री, बट द फैक्ट इज दैट यू हैव सम पीपल, देखिए बुढ़ापे में कई लोग क्या होते हैं, नहीं, बुढ़ापे में कई लोगों जो होते हैं जिनके ना आगे कोई होता है ना पीछे कोई होता है, वो बोलते हैं जो उन्हें बोलना है। हमारे प्रधानमंत्री भी उनमें से एक है। चलिए, thank you. This largely completes the topic. Tomorrow ma'am will be taking the class, and if there will be another additional class, you'll get the message. Otherwise 2:30 to 5, this is the, you'll get the mail, ma'am is taking the class.